I think movies really ended up shaping how I view clothes. I PA'd and coordinated for years for Frank Fleming and Lisa Frucht, who did Person of Interest, and then we moved on to Power. And Frank is still basically the king of the Power costume universe. I think that Bridgerton is interesting, and I know that a lot of people might do this, is because the colors are not correct for the time period. Like half the time the fabric is not. But that's why it's like this extreme fantasy version of the time period that's such good shorthand, and how the clothes are supposed to make you feel and put you in that world and put you in that mind state.
The fashion industry is very multifaceted, and a lot of the general public only gets to see a portion of that. It's been my mission to tell the stories of real life people who are in the fashion industry and really kind of keep it afloat. I'm really excited for my guest today, Courtney Wheeler, who by title is a costume designer, but she's really a storyteller. One of the things that we do aside from this is we have lots of conversations in the DMs, and there's a song goes down in the DM. It's true. A lot of the posts and fashion news stories and fashion events that I post on my Instagram, it starts lots of conversation in the DMs. And Courtney has been one of those people who is very active in the DM, and we talk about lots of different topics. So it only made sense to have her here today. So I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. So, again, your title is costume designer, but it's so much more than that. So, how would you describe your role to someone who doesn't know what a costume designer does?
I think that it is correct to say that costume design is storytelling, and that it is a way to create a character, and it informs a character into how they're putting on clothing, how they're wearing them, what type they're wearing, whether I would like you to, if the TV is on mute and you didn't know the storyline, you can still gather what's going on and who this character is without hearing a backstory, without really knowing, without someone telling you, showing you who this person is. And I do think that the costumes informs that, and I love that part of the job.
For sure. Yeah. I guess one of the things that I just kind of, my mind jumps to, and I apologize because there's so many things swirling in my head, but that was a good point that you talked about. And again, the idea of storytelling. How do you work with sort of writers or, producers to sort of convey that message? Because there has to be some cohesion there.
Oh, for sure. It's funny because we don't really, very rarely do we have conversations with the writers unless the writer happens to be a writer director or the writer is a producer, especially in television. It's very hands off. But we do have a lot of conversations with the director, with the actors, and where we want it to go, and making sure how we're seeing the character is aligning and how to present that to the world. And so then that is some of my favorite parts of that is the collaboration, is those first stages where you're talking about the character and you're seeing them and you're trying to understand their motivation, and it happened from the very first meeting. You get to the fitting room with the actor and how that comes alive.
So are you reading the script?
Yeah, so I get a script, and for TV, a lot of times it goes through different versions. There's a lot of changes that happen very quickly. We have to be prepared for that. Film, it's a little bit more locked in for the most part. But yeah, we see the script, and the script definitely tells us a lot, but it's not until I see the actor Because you can have the best laid plans for a character, but once you get in the fitting room, then you kind of form who that person is. Because the actor is also meeting you and their physicality and what they're bringing to the
Right.
part, and you don't want to override that. You want to complement it and you want to enhance it. And me and my design partner, Christina Spiridakis, we like to say like dog in boots. Like if an actor comes out and they look so uncomfortable and they're just kind of like come out and they're like, oh, I don't. Whereas like no,
We're not doing that.
we're not doing that. It looks very uncomfortable. It's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for us. The clothes are wearing you. You are. We don't want it to look like a costume. We want it to look like a real person, and that's my first instinct is if a costume works and be like, oh, you look like a real person. Yeah, that's it.
And that's actually one of the questions that I had in my head too. And it probably sounds like a silly question, but like, how do you make it look so authentic? So specifically, so on the show Bear, which you are the costume designer for, I always get excited when I see the credits. And I'm like, Courtney Wheeler. But there's two specific questions that I have. So one of the characters is of the pastry chef. I can't think of his name right
Marcus
now.
and
Marcus.
yeah.
I feel like his style is like so authentic. Like I see him and he's like totally like, yeah, Chicago. Like hands down. What kind of research goes into like making sure the character is super authentic? And I'll throw another sort of example. The cousin, I forget his
Richie.
name too, Richie,
Mm-hmm.
cousin, because they always call him cousin. I feel like his style is very like Chicago too, but like very different. Like, how do you kind of make that differentiation and not have crossover? Because if you see a full cast and they're supposed to be originally from Chicago, typically from a particular region, people dress similarly. But each of these characters have their own sense of style, but it's still so authentic. Like, how do you pull that off?
I mean, we're just the characters are very realized in the show, which also helps. Like from the actor and the script and what Chris Storer and Joanna want is so we have a strong idea who these people are, and also just research. As soon as I get to a place, especially if it's a lot of my work has taken me out of New York for the past few years, and so just getting to know the cities that I'm in, going to restaurants, going to different parts of town, talking to people. I already knew a bunch of Chicago
Yeah.
friends as well, so it also helped. And just learning the language of clothing of that region. It's different, you know. Chicago is different from LA. It's different from New York,
Yeah.
New Orleans, Miami, Atlanta, Texas. Like everything it's like so similar, but there's things that just are a little
There's
bit
little
different. That just are a
nuances.
little bit
The
different.
choice of sneakers.
Yeah.
Like it's very important. Like there was the scene when he was in Copenhagen and there was like a pan of like bottom to top. I'm like, oh my God, he looks like so Chicago. Like everything to the hat to the sneakers. Like it's amazing from a watcher to like see that all come together. Um, One of the other things that I thought about too, which is why I asked the earlier question about the collaboration that happens specifically with writers, because in one of the earlier scenes, Carmi, one of the main characters of the show, when he first learns that he now has to take over this restaurant, there's a scene when he's like trading jeans for meat.
Oh yeah, because you know, Carmi is kind of I wouldn't call him a hype beast, but he's a denim head. He likes quality. He knows what it that looks like, which I think also goes hand in hand with him being a chef. And so that was in the script already.
Okay.
And also the props team had everything to do with getting those jeans. What if it doesn't go on? If it does not touch the body, it's props. Even if it's
Got it.
clothing,
Got
sometimes
it.
they'll ask us for things, but Laura Roper, who was our props person, she's just yeah, she found those very pricey,
And I was
very
like,
pricey
it has to be
denim.
like Japanese denim. I'm sure it's just like very like high quality. Like you see it for a split second, but like you can tell like
I believe that it was I believe it was vintage Levi's, maybe
okay.
mixed with Japanese denim, but I do think it was like old school Levi's, which we bought around for this past season. In which is in a blink and you miss it moment, he's wearing Um, these 1950s, like true 1950s. My vintage
Wow.
dealer found them in a hoarder's house, and
Shut up.
they had all of this workwear from the like legit workwear, like their family members wore it
Wow.
to whatever job they had, and they're still like grease stains on them and like stains like from wiping their hands, and like these jeans were just so sick and beautiful. They were $2,500, the
Wow.
most expensive jeans I've ever bought, and Jeremy loved them and I loved them and Chris loved them, and I think we maybe saw 2 seconds of
I have to now
them.
rewatch and try to see if I can find that scene. But I thought that that was so interesting and sort of the juxtaposition between like his love for denim because then the jeans, the prop shows up again because they're in the oven.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there's a couple of scenes where we see the jeans in the oven. So I just thought that that was really cool, and I just was curious. I'm like, how does that moment happen? But interesting to know. I learned something today. So in terms of that show in particular, and we'll move on in a second, who would you say surprised you the most in terms of like working through their style?
Who would I say surprised me the most? I think they all were. I mean, I get great joy out of dressing Richie because it is a fine line. We don't ever want to make fun of Richie. He's a funny character. He can be funny, but he can also be very serious, and he takes, there's dignity there, even when he's making us laugh. And Eben, who plays Richie, never wants him to be a joke, which I also think is important. So we're dressing him as familiar as you can get. Like I feel like everyone knows a guy like Richie,
Yeah.
and we want to show that in the clothes. So it's very, his arc has been really interesting, and just how there's something very comforting in dressing him because it's so personal. The t-shirts he wears have, he is someone who's like, oh, this t-shirt was free, I'm gonna put it on, but he's also kind of very nostalgic and holds on to a lot of things. So you do see a lot of older pieces, whether it's him wearing the beef shirt every day, every time he's working, or he'll be wearing a Bulls tee, or he'll be wearing a t-shirt that's like very like he's had it since high school. Like you 100% know that man has had this t-shirt for years, and he's someone who kind of has maybe difficulty letting go of the past, but there's there's something nice about that. So I like working through him. I mean, it's always fun dressing Io Sydney.
Cool, Sydney.
That's so much vintage goes into that, and like really, we have some really sick like small designers too. So I like doing that. I'm sorry, I can't like pick one.
That's okay. I know. I'm sure it's difficult. I think Sydney's style is so interesting, and I was gonna say, is there a character where your style aligns with the most? And it's kind of leading the witness because I was like, she kind of reminds me of Courtney. Like, do you see a little bit of yourself in that character?
A little bit, I would say, but I also say that like I think a little bit of me goes into each of the characters somehow. Fair. No matter who it is, there's just like a little part was like, yeah, I do that. Like, oh yeah, like that's like very much how I would put that on my body. Sydney's definitely, well, because I think I can relate to Sydney and how she moves through the world and her process of trying to get her footing in this world that she loves, but also frustrates her. But she also, has some failures, and she's had successes, and she's just trying to make it. And so I'm sure we can all relate to it. But and also in her point of view, style wise, is similar. There is overlap, but there's also overlap with Io style as well. And I think that it's such a good blend of how we view clothes comes together with Sydney.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. I love it. I love it. Great show. If you haven't watched it, you should.
Sydney doesn't wear enough black for me. I do think I
wear. She doesn't wear black, but she wears a lot of interesting shapes.
She does. Definitely her patterns. Proportions are right up my alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, it's kind of like whatever. Anyway, but I just as I'm watching, I'm like, wow, like she kind of really reminds me of Courtney. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about like your journey into this career path. Like, how did it start? When did you first fall in love with fashion or clothes, or was it something that like morphed?
I mean, I think I always have been a little in love with fashion and clothes. My uh, paternal grandmother used to make me, and I wish I could find them. She made paper dolls. She
Paper
drew
dolls.
them herself and like put the clothes
Wow.
together. She was a great artist, and she drew them, and she gave me clothes for them, and from there, and they both of my grandmothers were so well dressed, like such well dressed women, and I loved like seeing how they put on clothes, and they also showed me. I used to watch My Fair Lady and Sound of Music, and those were those costumes are so memorable. Like
Yep.
what Maria wears in Sound of Music, and what the Baroness wears in Sound of Music, and then what Eliza Doolittle is wearing for My Fair Lady, and how I remember I have such a specific memory of all of those costumes and watching those. I mean, even movies like Back to the Future and The Goonies,
Oh,
like they were
first of all,
so.
Back to the Future is literally like my top 10 or
Well,
my
I mean,
top
it's great.
10. I mean, it is,
It's great.
but I'm obsessed. Like, it's like one of my emotional support movies. Like,
And like what Marnie McFly wear. Like you can
the
like you
jeans,
got it
the
with the
sneakers,
vest
the
and
jacket.
it's just it's so specific, and you know that, and I love that you know what a character is. You're like, oh, that's that character. Like
One of my projects, one of my styling projects at FIT, I did like a Marty McFly inspired like look. Like I really like period pieces or like decades. Like I
mm-hmm.
like to look at a decade and like emulate like a decade. And
Yeah,
like his outfit was so 1985.
100%, 100%.
So obsessed. Sorry.
And I love no, I no, but that's the thing. It's like I think movies really ended up shaping how I view clothes. And in terms of there's so many movies that shape that. Clueless. Oh my gosh. Like the clothes in Clueless are just Mona May did the costumes, and she's just brilliant, and she also did Romeo and Michelle's high school
Oh,
reunion.
she did?
And
Now that you say that, I can kind of see some
yeah.
similarities
Mm-hmm.
there.
And like how like Clueless and Goonies and all of these movies are just like checkpoints and like The Craft, and just I was like, oh, they just built me up so much, and I think that I've always been interested in that. Always loved fashion magazines. Thought I was going to be a fashion editor when I grew up, and until we realized that wasn't
I know that was
working.
yeah.
But we and I used to have my mom buy me all the books on fashion and how to illustrate. And I took classes at FIT in high school in summer and on Saturday,
You
Summer
did
Live,
Saturday
Saturday
Live.
Live.
Yep. I
Um,
remember.
and I got an internship um, with Tommy Hilfiger when I was in high school. I saw him in my mall in the Galleria
Oh.
and asked, and I don't know, we were just talking. I was like, oh my God, I love fashion so much. And he was like, do you watch my daughter's show? Because she had a show at the time.
She did on like MTV or
It was like on
something.
MTV. I was like, yeah. Which was, I've watched an episode or two.
Yeah.
But he was like, oh, you should call my assistant. I can get you an internship. We call her,
Very
we'll
cool.
set you up. And that's how I got my first internship. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So it's a unique story because I feel like with this fashion thing, and I'm sure there's been moments in your career where there took iterations, right? Because I always say my story, the first thing that I wanted to be, actually, I was obsessed with, well, not even me, but I guess my parents, and by my parents, then me, I was obsessed with soap operas. All My Children was like a huge thing when I was a kid, and I always loved how Erica, what was her name? Erica Kane.
Yes.
Erica Kane, how she dressed. And I just kind of began to be like obsessed, and that's where I kind of started my curiosity of like who picks her clothes and like who's that person and
Well,
who's
because
the
soap
shopper.
opera style is just so over the top. It's so glamorous,
Right.
Yeah.
And what I learned from asking a lot of questions, what I learned was like literally because soap operas it's a daily thing. It's like you just see the script and you have to just like go and shop. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot of like custom things that you can
No.
really
Yeah.
do. Like it's very like hustle bustle in the moment. But I say all that to say I feel like through my career, my goals and what I wanted to do professionally like took so many different pivots.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it was the same experience for you, or you just always knew like you wanted to do costume?
I don't really think I had a grasp on a career as a costume designer until I got an internship on a movie.
Okay.
Even though in high school I did the costumes for school plays, and I loved movies and TV shows and how their costumes shaped me, it wasn't really, I didn't even think of it as a career choice. Also, I do think I was tunnel vision in that I was taking these classes at FIT, and then I went to college for fashion design. Um, and I would intern every summer. I interned at a company called White and Worn that did knitwear. And I interned with stylists, and I interned with lingerie, small lingerie brands. And that was kind of, I thought, would be my path. But the more internships I took, and I was like, oh, this isn't quite what I want to do. I don't know how to describe it. I don't really want to change buttons from the same cardigan every season. And that's what I remember specifically is like them being like, we've done this sweater. Like, this is our fifth iteration of the sweater. We're just changing the stitching, or like we're just like switching it up a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. Will this be my life? And so
And you were like supposed to be excited about it. Like it's like
and I wasn't sure, and I was just like, oh, I mean, I get like I completely understand like why people go down that path. 100%. I had fun in those internships. But I was like, there's something that I don't know, and even styling wasn't quite right. I was
I
assistant
knew
cosmetologist and
right away.
stylist.
I assisted one thing and I was like, this is not my jam.
And I was just like, oh my, and I was like, almost. It was kind of like, oh, I was like, oh, and not quite, because I do think there was a lot of, I feel like my voice have gone up 7 octaves, and then I'm gonna bring it back down. I think my being on set, and especially doing editorial for magazines, I saw how much like the advertisers played a part in like what they were using and how they were styling, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And it wasn't really, or it was about the hype. It became, I love clothes, but I think it became so much about the clothes instead of about like the story of it. And once I had an internship on a movie, it was called What Maisie Knew. It's with Julianne Moore and Alexander Skarsgård and Steve Coogan.
I saw that.
And Stacey Patat was the costume designer, and Stacey Patat does a lot of Sofia Coppola's films.
Okay.
Like she did Priscilla, which is gorgeous, and she's Sophia's girl, and she was such a great person to be on the first job with, because I do love how she designs and how easy it feels, but also brings a style, and there's something about it that you like to watch. So once I was on that, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Like, I love clothes, I love fashion, I love storytelling. Like, this is perfect for me. And then from being an intern, I PA'd, and which is production assistant. Yeah. I was a costume production assistant for a few years, and then after that I became a costume coordinator, and from there my first job as assistant costume designer was on a TV show called Bloodline. It was on Netflix.
Okay. I feel like I've seen the advertisements.
And yes, about a family in the Keys. Nothing to do with vampires. People always think that has to do with vampires. I think Bloodline confuses them. But we mean like literal, like familial bloodlines.
Like family.
Yeah. But yeah, so long story short, winded answer. It took a lot of different internships to figure out what I wanted to do. And I do think internships was a good way to like
test things out
without
test and learn.
Because like you don't have any, and I felt like I was an intern. I felt like I was I was interning in my mid-20s, and while everyone else was getting jobs,
No,
because
I
I was
love
just,
that.
I still don't know, because I was just like, I don't know. And it was so helpful for me to be like, oh, this is why. And like, since then, it's just been, yeah, I'm on my path. I'm on my path.
But it also gives you the tools and the building blocks. I'm sure all those experiences made you the better costume designer that you are now because you had like a little bit of all those different experiences.
Yeah.
How minutia or even monotonous it might feel to try to figure out the new iteration of the sweater. I love that example because it's being someone who's worked in the corporate world and worked in product development for most of my career. That is literally what happens. We have a design meeting every season, and it's like, we need something different. And we're like, let's change this petal pink to fuchsia pink. And it's like, that's the big change of the collection, right? I definitely can relate to, that piece of it of like not feeling like there's a lot of art in it and it becomes more about business than art. But there's both sides to that, right? Like that's what makes the fashion industry so dynamic because you need the art to drive the business, right? Because you have to be good at what you do to tell a complete story or continue to tell a story so that people can watch the show. So, and I think it's one of those things where costume is one of those things where people don't realize the impact, but how much inspiration do you get with an outfit that you're going to a Friday night where you're mirroring a character on a movie or you understand? So I think it's something that people don't realize creeps into their unconscious every day when they get dressed and put on clothes.
And it does. And I think that people don't think about it. And, we always say a lot of times in my industry, like the best costume design is the costume design you don't notice. Or like you don't think about it because it feels real because you're just like, oh, yeah, of course they're wearing that. What else would they be wearing?
Right.
And of course that gets into a lot of times, oh, well, did you really do anything? And it's like, we did in fact we did many things to get there.
Yes.
Because I do think it's a misunderstanding that because people feel like they get dressed every day, that it's easy to create and shop for these characters because you're like, well, all you're doing is putting on clothes. But instead of like realizing, you see this shirt, we got 10 to sometimes 20 versions of this top for you to get to that top because we needed the perfect top and it had to be the perfect fit and length and color and style and material. And that's where we landed. And I'm sure we still did something to it, whether a tailor cropped it, brought it in, changed the sleeve, and just that little. And there's these details that your brain doesn't necessarily pick up. But if it's wrong, you notice. Because if it's wrong, you'll be like, I don't know, I don't like it. And you're like, I don't like it. But when you don't notice that, that to me, I like when people are just like, oh, it feels so real, or oh, I know someone like this, or oh, like a real person, because that's what I want. That's what I want your feeling to be. Even if it's something like you covet that person's clothing, you'll see someone on the street, and you're like, oh, I love that, and that's so it all makes sense to me.
Yeah,
it all makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I definitely see it and appreciate everything you do, like every character, and it's just like even like when you have somebody who's supposed to be like a fashion victim, I'm like, how do you dress that person?
Yes.
You mentioned Clueless earlier. I reference Amber a lot. Like when someone's asking to describe me, like she's like an Amber. Like she has all the designer, and it's just like something just isn't quite right.
Yeah.
So one would argue like you're could be buying literally the same things. And as a matter of fact, there was a scene where her and Amber wore the same dress, right?
Yeah.
So you're literally buying the same things for these two characters, but it's like the little nuances in the way that it's styled with the hair, with the shoes,
exactly.
Just makes a huge difference. So I think that is one example within a movie where literally two people are wearing the same exact thing, but it just does not hit the same.
Exactly. It all depends on how it looks and how you style it and how you put together and whether it's like how it suits the character and the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's subtle things. It's fit. It's color. It's everything.
All those things.
It's everything.
So do you have like a costume design mama or papa, like somebody that like you look up to and you're like, yes, that is like godmother or godfather?
There's so many in our industry. I will say Clueless was hit me in a really big way. I would say that I did learn from some really great people, though. Um, I PA'd and coordinated for years for Frank Fleming and Lisa Frucht, who did Person of Interest, and then we moved on to Power. And Frank is still basically the king of the Power costume universe, and Lisa, that was my first ACD job with Lisa at Bloodline, and they definitely taught me what to look for and how to dress someone, whether it's fit, how to shop, how like to sharpen my eye. So I will say, and I tried to every designer. I shopped for a while before. After I was assistant costume designer, I started shopping more for different designers and learning how they work and learning if you scrunch a fabric and it stays scrunched, don't get that fabric. It's going to wrinkle. It's going to be a nightmare on set. Or noise, color, you know, fabrics can make the sound, and it will drive the sound department crazy. So we stay away from certain windbreaker material because it's a nightmare to fix. And same thing with clinging jewelry, things like that. Even though we were like, we want more jewelry, and then they're like, you cannot put this many bangles on this person.
Well, because that's a sound nightmare too.
Yes,
like all
exactly.
those bangles. I have a segue story, and I have so many corporate fashion horror stories. But there was a meeting where I was presenting bestsellers. It was like every Monday in a buying office, you recap your bestsellers, as you can imagine, right? Because you're looking at sales for the week. And I was presenting my bestsellers, and I used to wear a lot of, in my 20s, I was in like the big jewelry era. I wore a lot of earrings and bracelets and things like that. And I'm like presenting, and I'm going through my sales. And my VP was like, take those bracelets off. Like in a meeting in front of everybody. And I was so embarrassed. And I will tell you that it has shaped, I am now a minimalist when it comes to jewelry because of that very moment.
I understand that feeling. That is mortifying. I'm like,
okay. It's crazy. And I have a cousin who's like, she's kind of minimalist with her style too. And she was like, yeah, she was telling a story at Thanksgiving. She was like, I remember when Tara stopped wearing earrings and then I stopped wearing earrings. And I'm like, girl, you don't even know the story behind why I stopped wearing earrings. Like, it was a result of a traumatic experience.
Because you don't really know it. You don't know, you're not, it's not something that you'll immediately think about when you're putting on clothing, but then when someone else is like, you're presenting to someone or it's outside looking in, you're like, this is distracting.
Yes, like craziness. But anyway.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that I look up to, and there are so many wonderful costume designers. I just watched Saltburn, and the costume designer for that, oh, her name is escaping me. She's just wonderful. She also did the last season of Bridgerton, I believe. And
that's my bag.
I love her costume design because there's something, especially with the Saltburn, and there's like something a little bit off in it that I like. Like, and she knows that, and she'll talk about it. And I think that she's just so intelligent. And I like costume designers who are approaching it. I don't know. I love hearing costume designers talk about their work. I love hearing anyone who's good at their job talk about their work. It's so fascinating to me. So I digress, but yes.
Yeah, so those are some of the people that you look up to. Yeah. So something just popped into my head. In terms of costume design, Bridgerton or Gilded Age?
Oh, okay, I haven't seen this past season of Gilded Age yet. I'm behind.
It's only a few episodes. It's okay.
I feel like I'm a few episodes. I will say they're both, the costume departments do phenomenal jobs in both. I think that Bridgerton is interesting, and I know that a lot of people might poo-poo this, is because the colors are not correct for the time period. Like half the time the fabric fantasy. Is not. But that's why it's like this extreme fantasy version of the time period that's such good like shorthand, and like how the clothes are supposed to make you feel and put you in that world and put you in that mind state, that I think they're so fun. Like I just think they're like such fun costumes. And visual like the color, it's like candy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I get there's definitely a lot of, especially when there's period pieces where people kind of do some research and they're like, that's not accurate. But I do like just Bridgerton as a show, we know it's all fantasy, but so I think it's cool to be able to take some traditional things and then make it like kind of like your own, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to trying to be exactly factual to what really happened at the time. So.
Exactly.
What would you attribute, like, what's a moment in your career that was like really challenging? Like something that you had to deal with that was like really challenging that you had to overcome?
I think when I first started as an assistant costume designer and I first started shopping, trying to not work from a place of panic.
I'm
Um,
sure it was very difficult.
because I think I was just like, I was overthinking it so much that I was not thinking about the characters and I was not thinking about the storytelling. I was just hyper focusing on a piece that I was told to get or something that I was trying to work so hard for like perfection, but then not asking for help
Yeah.
and not asking for direction and trying to do it all on my own. I think that I had to stop doing that, and it took me shopping. And that's what I would say. Um, Once I started shopping for other designers after Bloodline, it helped me exercise that muscle of shopping a lot, shopping fast, learning different characters,
Yeah.
learning what fits characters, especially if I wasn't going to be in the fitting, looking at pictures and looking at their sizes and being like, this will be good for them, this won't be good for them, these are the colors to stay away from, this is a good color, this is a good fit. Oof, not that material. Because there's some materials that are literally, I'm like, this isn't clothes, this is not fabric. It's so see through. Um, and I think that I had to listen to myself and not being afraid to talk to the costume designer and having a conversation if I was having difficulty finding a particular piece. Because the best laid plans of we want we want a burnt orange shirt, scoop neck. It has to be cropped, but the crop has to be a not a straight edge. It has to be a curved edge hem. And being like, I can't find that anywhere. What do I do? But instead of searching, you know, 50 stores for it, be like, hey, I've checked 10 stores. What do I do? Do you want me to keep going or do you
Right.
want me
Should
to
we
pivot?
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned to do is like pivot and think on your toes and think creatively and think what else can I do to get this person this look.
It sounds like problem solving, like
Yeah.
figuring out how to problem solve. I can relate to that as well. I feel like I probably shared the same experience early in my career. You know, certain personality types, you know, you just want to do a good job and you want to do it, and you are a self-believer.
Yeah.
I just took the high five test and self-believer was my number one. No surprise. You are a self-believer and you know that you can do it, and sometimes you just want to show that you can do it.
Yeah.
But what I found through trial and error, it's easier to just ask. Just ask for some guidance, because that 2 hours that you spent spinning on something
Yes.
could have been answered or at least helped guide you to the answer in 5 minutes.
100%.
So.
And you might have, or being like, hey, I didn't find this, but how about, do you think I could go this direction instead? Ask, have that conversation.
And have a solution.
Have a
that was a good
solution.
thing. Like asking and having, like being like, hey, so I checked 10 stores, I couldn't find it, but how about this? Does that work?
Exactly.
You know?
And it took me, even through Bloodline, it took me through those seasons, it took me shopping more to find that rhythm and to find that work style that was not white knuckling it and like in spending hours on one piece instead of being like, hey, what else can I do? What else can we do here? And so yeah, that's what I will say.
So is there like relationships with brands or designers or things that are leveraged in your particular line of work?
It's interesting because yes and no. A lot of times I will say when you're starting out, and in many instances, in most instances, no. It takes maybe a certain designer or a certain project that maybe you'll work with a a brand for.
Yeah.
Sometimes if the actor is a brand ambassador for, they will be like, oh yeah, we'll dress. All of the clothes will be from Louis Vuitton, or all of, will be Chanel. And for the principals, for the lead. Then, or, you might be able to foster great relationships with, a lot of times in the James Bond movies, because it's so glamorous and it's such a honor to be on those things. A lot of times the costume designer can work with brands specifically with creating looks specifically for those characters.
Right.
Um,
because it's such an iconic, like prestigious, like I could see like Gucci being like, I want to dress 007. Like if it just like makes perfect sense.
Exactly. Because we work with brands, we're able to these smaller brands. Christina and I are able to foster good relationships with them, and so they'll they'll put stuff on the side for us and like, hey, let's send you this. We'll do what you want. Especially we don't have to like pay outright. We'll pay later. We're like, hey, can we just borrow this for the fittings and we'll give you this later. We've created a really good relationship with Mers B. Schwanen, who does Carmi's t-shirt on the bear, and they are so lovely and they're so helpful and supportive, and we're so happy to see how their business has grown.
I was going to say, but that also must impact those small businesses. So that must be a nice thing to be able to give some shine to a business that's a little bit smaller and kind of help them propel to like the next level.
It has. And, and they've said that, since the bear, they've seen, they've watched their company get bigger than they
imagine.
Yeah. And that's amazing. We just had dinner with them the other night, and it was so wonderful to talk to them and to see their growth. And I love getting DMs and emails from companies who are just like, this product is selling out, like this is amazing, whether it's Carmi's in an '07 jacket, or something that I always worn, her tote bag. I think that's a really fun part of the job. And so I think that's our relationship, or at least my relationship, and with brands is I usually work with the smaller ones. And of course we did Tom Brown, because I'm
it's
so sorry.
On the tip of my tongue. I'm like, I wanted you to get through this moment, but how did the Tom Brown jacket happen?
Well, Io works with Tom Brown a lot for her press looks and her red carpet looks, and Chris Storr ended up becoming friendly with Tom like during like the whole press cycle of the bear, and he was like, Courtney, I think I got Tom to do the chef coat, and it was so natural because Chris is such a fan of Tom Brown. That was, I think, one of his first big purchases when he became a writer. Was a Tom Brown suit, and even Carmi's talking about Tom Brown in the show when he's talking about the this guy who does this cool cropped pant. That was when he's telling the story to Claire. He is talking about
a
Tom Brown.
He's talking about that one. Completely went over my head, but that's just because I have personal reasons about the Claire Carmi relationship.
And
but
so,
we won't go there.
We won't go there.
I just get annoyed every scene. I don't like her for him. But I digress.
So I think having Tom Brown, and so that's why Tom Brown was able. That's why he's like, oh, my friend sent this for you. That's why Carmen was like, my friend sent, and it was the Tom Brown.
Right. Duh. Yeah. He did say, my friend sent this for you. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was an amazing moment. And I feel like, I mean, I there was some press around it, around the code. I think that's probably when the show became on my radar, to be honest, before I even knew you were the costume designer for it, honestly. But when I saw in the press the Tom Brown coat, because I've been obsessed with Tom Brown for the past couple of years, who, in my opinion, really should be the designer of the year. I think List gave it to Prada again for the second year.
Oh, wow. Surprising.
Which is
That is
very
yeah.
surprising. Like last year, okay.
Yeah.
This year, not so much.
Yeah.
I think it should have been Tom Brown, but whatever. But I think that's when the Bear first came on my radar, and I was like, okay, what's the show? Let me add it to my list because it's hard to watch TV. And then when I learned that you were the costume designer, I was like, oh my God, I gotta watch. But love the show. Love the show.
Thank you.
Love the show. Love what you're doing there. But how would you say like either like your race or your gender has affected like your career? Is it a thing? Is it not a thing?
I would say I have been lucky enough from when I started as a PA on. The costume for costume designers, it's usually women and queer folks work. There, like we're usually the ones who are in it. So pay inequity is a big problem because of that. In terms of what everyone else in comparison on set makes, like the production designer, producers, other department heads, comparatively. So I will say overall, that's something that we're trying, the pay gap, we're trying to close that. But growing up in the industry, I was lucky enough to be with Frank Fleming, who's a Black man, and to have always felt unhindered by that. It can be very much so a boys' club, and it can very much be, our industry can be white and can be boys' club, and it can be all those things, and you do have to work past that. And I think becoming a department head definitely has brought that out a little bit more, because you have to be in the meetings, because you have to be outward facing more. Right. And that has been an experience. I feel like because I have brothers, I'm kind of like, okay, yes, but you're wrong. Like I'm more easily like, okay, but yeah, let's be serious. But it is still hard, because it can feel like a boys' club, and that can feel a little alienating. But I try to stand my ground. Yeah.
You said something about pay equity, and it made me think about a lot of these shows, TV shows, and movies are big budget productions. Yeah. How much would you say, in a percentage wise, goes to costume?
Oh, I think it depends. I do think that depends. Budget wise, I do think it's more so, I would say, sometimes when we get the budget, we're like, hi, I know you think that this will be cheap, because even if it's like contemporary or people don't realize like what goes in. So if you're doing stunts, I'm like, hey, if we're doing stunts, we'll need at least 5 of something, and that's maybe just for the stunt person and not the principal. And that principal, we need 3, and like you need to build up that. And if it's something that takes place before, now we're in 2023, say it takes place before 2019. Now it's getting dicey in terms of the trend. So now shopping is not just shopping inside, right. Now we have to go thrift. Now we have to go vintage. Now we have to be creative. Now we have to really dig. And I did a movie that took place in 1992, and no one really clocked that it was period. Like everyone was like, it should be easy to find. And I was like, guys, this is period now. It's a period piece. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. It's hard. And so this is, especially it was a kids movie, and there was kids vintage is very hard to find. I'm sure. And so it was very much like, hey, this budget, has to go a little higher. It has to go a little higher. And so just like we are constantly trying to explain ourselves. I have no problem with doing that and getting what we need, but it is a moment of we do really have to explain what we need, which
Yeah.
can be frustrating because
Yeah.
sometimes we feel like, well, this department doesn't have to explain why they need this. Why should we?
Right.
And I also think, going back to the diversity thing and thinking about it in real time, um, I was always in departments that made sure there was diversity in their departments.
Got it.
And I think that that is important, to have voices in the room that doesn't necessarily reflect your own experience, because I think it can better inform your characters and
For sure.
how you work. And I think even sitting at the department head table, it's important for me to be there and for me to say something if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sound right. So I do think it's important for representation 100% in the industry and working there. And I've never you I've always viewed as like my presence as a plus,
Right.
because now you have a point of view that's not just, a little bit homogenous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So and we're going to start to wrap up, but what does success look like for you? Like, where do you see yourself at the pinnacle of this costume design, or wherever you see yourself in the future?
Respected by my peers, honestly.
It's a word.
I honestly think that's the most, that's really important to me. When fellow costume designers and costumers come up to me and DM me or write me, or I see them in real life, they're like, "Oh, I love that you did this. It's great work. I'm really proud of you." Like that's really means a lot to me. I'm blown away with the love that like I've received from the bear, and I look forward to making sure that I keep making everyone proud.
Right. That you
Yeah.
kind of keep topping yourself every time.
Yeah, and no pressure, but also, yeah, it's just awesome to see. My parents have never watched the show, but it's great that they're proud of me for doing it.
Shame on them. Shame on them. I love it. So was the Bear nominated for any Emmys last year, or
Yes.
are they up this year? Oh, they were nominated
Yes.
last year.
Yeah,
Okay.
they've won a lot of things.
Okay.
And hopefully they'll keep winning, because it's a great show. The cast and crew and writers, they just do an amazing job, and I'm really proud of the work that we do there.
You guys do amazing work. I can't wait to see season 3. I'm in. I'm hooked. What mark do you want to leave on the industry?
Oh, I mean,
Like, what do you want to be known for? You talked about being respected by your peers, but like, what do you want to be known for?
I think for people like me who geek out about films, or who have a favorite film, and one of the things that they go to, whether it's a TV show or movie, are the costumes, and knowing like, oh yeah, I love that look, and that it's influenced them in some way. That how they get dressed in the morning in some part is because a character they saw, like, and that they still continue to love.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much. This was a great
Thanks for having me.
conversation. I feel like I want a part 2. Like, when you do your next project, we can definitely do a part 2.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Real Life Fashion Stories. I hope this conversation was as impactful to you as it was for me, and I can't wait to see you guys at the next one.